What on earth has Trump done? That's the question we're going to be answering in this segment on the subject of these intentionally dystopian, cruel policies that Trump has implemented on immigration. And specifically what he's referring to as Alligator Alcatraz, and how now some Republicans are going, wait, we want one in our state. And what is, for the sake of sort of this Stephen Miller idea of striking fear into the hearts of everyone, with little to no regard of who it is that you're grabbing up, intentionally cruel prisons. We have a lot to break down, a lot of updates to give you substantively. To do so, I'm bringing in the wonderful... Yeah, that. Brittany Page. As we go through this, a reminder to search up Brittany Page on YouTube and support her channel. How are you, Brittany? It's been a second.
I am good. How are you, Luke?
Whatever. So what
enjoying all of the terrors.
Yeah. What do we have here?
Well, like you said, the Republicans are really excited. They want their own Alligator Alcatraz. And to kind of set the stage for this, I mean, since Alligator Alcatraz has opened in Florida, we've started to get media reports. Democratic lawmakers have gone to Alligator Alcatraz demanding to see what people are going through there. We had Democratic lawmaker Debbie Wasserman Schultz call it an internment camp, saying that people are being held there in conditions that are horrifying. We've seen press conferences from people talking about the conditions. We have a new report out from Human Rights Watch this week detailing the horrors that are going on there. But Republicans see all of this. They see all of this information coming in and they say, you know what? I think we want one of those in our state. And that includes Texas. That includes Senator John Cornyn, who went so far as to say, you see what they're doing over there in Florida with Alligator Alcatraz? We want that here in Texas.
The state of Florida has stepped up to the plate recently, helping the administration to open a detention facility that's come to be known as Alligator Alcatraz. I'm hopeful that other states will step up to help in similar ways. If we could find a way to make something like this work in Texas, I would strongly support it. And I'd encourage our governor, as well as Secretary Noem, to explore the possibility of locating future detention facilities in Texas.
And just to contextualize as we're going through this, the knee-jerk reaction from a lot of folks, definitely if they're on the right, is going to be, who cares? I mean, these are dangerous criminals, right? Surely these are the threats they're talking about. The murderers, the rapists, Hannibal Lecter, stumble across the border, he eats you for lunch, all that. But what we're seeing is that Trump increasingly, Stephen Miller increasingly, will lose it when the daily numbers for detentions and then for deportations aren't high enough. Then the conclusion they draw is, well, I guess let's just go grab up whoever we possibly can. You even have headlines like this from the Miami Herald: DACA recipient detained at Alligator Alcatraz, people with lawful status. So you should have a basic principle of humanitarian policies, and you can do that. We've seen you can do enforcement without this dystopian world they've created. And also, if that principle by itself philosophically doesn't resonate enough, then know that they're perfectly willing, as we saw with the El Salvadoran prison and now here, to disregard the immigration status and the criminal record or lack thereof of individuals and make them suffer while the legality gets sorted out. And sometimes it doesn't even end up getting sorted out, Brittany.
Yeah, and that's an important point. There was reporting from NBC News on this, specifically on some of these numbers. When we're talking about who they're going after, the Trump administration keeps saying, no, we're going after the worst of the worst. We are getting murderers off the streets. We're getting rapists off the streets. And then we start to actually see, when they let the journalists and reporters who are trying to get this information, when they're actually able to determine who has been taken into custody, they're finding that they don't actually have criminal records. And if we look at that NBC News article, in that they talk about some of the numbers. They write, as of June 20th, more than 56,000 people were spending the night in detention centers nationwide on any given day. That's 40% more than in June 2024, and the highest detention population in U.S. history, according to this new Human Rights Watch report. Nearly 72% of those detained have no criminal history. So in order to hit these numbers, in order to look impressive and look like they're actually doing something, the Trump administration is just going after anyone, apparently, anyone that they feel fits within the narrative of trying to get people off the street, because 72% of those detained have no criminal history. And when you hear the conditions that they're being held in, I mean, again, we just heard Senator John Cornyn, he wants an Alligator Alcatraz in Texas. This reporting talks about what people are going through there. Detainees in Alligator Alcatraz, a new facility in the Everglades, described what they called torturous conditions in cage-like units, full of mosquitoes, where fluorescent lights shine bright on them at all times. Detainees here called attention to unsanitary conditions, as well as a lack of food and reliable medical treatment for chronic illnesses. 72% have no criminal history, and they're being held in cage-like conditions, being eaten alive by mosquitoes, which can carry lethal diseases, by the way, not being given proper food, not being given proper medical treatment. So is this what John Cornyn wants to see in Texas? People being held in these animal-like conditions, no criminal history. That's what he wants for the state of Texas?
And yeah, I mean, it's just extremely dark. And for what? It seems like you referenced so that the spokespeople can go out and tout what at the end of the day are meaningless numbers. I heard someone say too, wait, given the sheer mass of stories we're getting of people who are not at all the identification that Trump sometimes on the campaign trail would promise this would be targeted at, are they even making communities safer at all? Are they even finding the public safety threats? Probably not in many cases. And instead are going for, another way someone described it was, this is kind of a crass way to say so, but low-hanging fruit. The people who aren't, quote unquote, hiding. People, like one of the stories, the Venezuelans just got released from that El Salvadoran prison to Venezuela. And you have stories of people who had a real asylum claim. And then just recently a grandpa who had been tortured and in his home country and then sought asylum. Correct? That's why we have that process. You could say sometimes it's been overdue. That's the exact type of story as to why we have the asylum seeking process. And as he's doing everything right. And something that I find kind of compelling is when you speak to people who have fled such conditions. I think he came from Haiti and was tortured by the regime there many years ago. You end up hearing a story of someone who is more patriotic than a lot of these Republicans, who actually believed in the opportunity. And because I guess those folks are the easiest to find, to target, the people we'd want to be in the United States are being treated the worst in some of these cases, and they deserve advocacy.
Well, and like you said, if they're showing up to court appearances, then it's not actually about people who, quote unquote, do it the right way, right? If they're showing up to arrest people at their court appearances. And you made note of what happened with the Venezuelan immigrants who were sent to El Salvador. ProPublica just did this extensive reporting on those men and what has happened to them. And like you said, many of them were actually taken in the middle of their immigration cases. I think it was nearly half of them, 118 of the men, and there were just over 230 of them. So they were taken out of the country in the middle of their immigration cases, which should have protected them from deportation. And some of them were only days away from a final hearing in their case. So again, it does come back to they're trying to pad these numbers, right? And yeah, like you highlight there, many of these men also were not convicted of a crime, had no criminal background. And so it begs the question, how are they finding these people? I mean, they're going to farms like we've seen in California. They're going to places of work. They're going to courthouses. When they're going after people who are working hard in farms, when they're going after people who are going through the immigration process, going to court, it makes it seem like they're just after anyone who is an immigrant. It doesn't matter if you did things the quote unquote right way. It doesn't matter if you're not a criminal. It just matters that they want you out of the country.
My goodness. Yeah, this ProPublica piece, I'll try to remember to link it in the description, Jane, if you can make a note of that, because we won't have a chance to read through this all. But they say last week the men were released as suddenly as they've been taken away. Now the truth of their stories, one by one, will begin to be told starting here. And it goes through some of what Brittany was outlining.
Yeah, and they are still soliciting information on that. It's an ongoing reporting. They're updating this database, but they're trying to cover the stories of every single person that was taken. And it's really tragic. I mean, even the reporting today this week in Guardian, the Guardian, where they talked about this Human Rights Watch report, kind of going back to John Cornyn. You know, it's not just the Alligator Alcatraz. This is kind of across the board with these ICE facilities, because they're just trying to pad their numbers, because they're going after whoever they can get their hands on, that, you know, there's more concerns that they're treating people like dogs. So this Guardian reporting, they say migrants at a Miami immigration jail were shackled with their hands tied behind their backs and made to kneel to eat food from styrofoam plates like dogs, according to reports of conditions at 3 overcrowded South Florida facilities. So these are the consequences of just going after anybody and trying to tell the American people, look at our numbers, look at the number of arrests that we've been able to do, look at the number of people that are in custody. Well, when the vast majority of them have no criminal background, you're not keeping them in sanitary conditions, you're violating their due process rights, you're violating their human rights. This is not an effective way to treat anybody, let alone deal with humans on any level. But also, I have to say, you know, last year, $12.8 billion was budgeted for new affordable housing. And as we know, in the latest Republican tax and spending bill, they're set to spend $45 billion on immigration detention facilities. That's almost 4 times what they spent last year on affordable housing. Imagine what we could be doing with this money instead of violating people's human rights, instead of violating their due process rights, instead of holding people in cages like dogs, what we could be doing to actually help American people, what we could be doing to help everybody in this country with affordable housing in the homelessness crisis. Imagine that.
Wow. Yeah, that's a stunning stat too, because one, it feels weird to just talk about numbers with the gravity of these human stories, but since we extensively touched on that, to speak of the numbers, over and over again, we're finding out not only is all the other stuff true, but to create such dystopian conditions for the sake of, so that Benny Johnson can film a video. What's up, guys? It's Benny. Look at how Alligator Alcatraz is open. They're actually,
I've never seen one of his videos, but I think it's exactly like that. I'm just gonna assume.
Yeah, it is. End quote. That was all it. And they're also operating wildly inefficiently and wasting a ton of money for these ventures. So that's just an extra element and layer to this. It's not only horrible on a human level, but it's also a waste of money, Doge, for the sake of a campaign PR stunt with real human costs. Again, Brittany, if you want to support her work, you can go to Brittany Page on YouTube. Brittany E. Page. Brittany, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.